The regular meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Tuesday, March 26th, 2019 will be called to order at 7 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation that I will give, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. This is from the prophet Kahlil Gibran. Let there be space in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cups, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together, and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. Even as the strings of a lute are alone, they quiver, but with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hands of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together. For the pillars of a temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm taking this as a challenge. I'm going to be doing a really obscure one.
I had it memorized, but...
Yeah, right.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley.
Here.
Alderwoman Tierney. Here. Alderman Payon.
Here.
Alderman Pendell Charles.
Here.
Alderman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Here.
Alderwoman Henson. Alderman Savage.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present.
Okay, Miss City Attorney.
Alderwoman Henson.
Hey.
I saw her coming.
Miss City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So this time I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended to remove O-9-19, definition of family on first reader.
So moved.
Any
So
discussion? No?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ms. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ceremonial items, beginning with City Council citation to the Annapolis Marine Art Gallery, 40th anniversary.
Ms. Shaw, please come forward. I'll come over to you. Thank you. On behalf of the citizens of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of the 40th anniversary of the Annapolis Marine Art Gallery. For decades, your business has provided the best of marine art to the Mid-Atlantic collectors community and helped shape Annapolis as an arts destination. Through your curated displays, you exposed generations of residents and visitors to world-renowned painters. We commend your constant presence as a premier retailer on City Dock, continually setting the standard for quality and artistry that has earned you a loyal customer following for 4 decades. Congratulations on this significant milestone, and we wish you great success in all of your future endeavours. Thank you so much.
So what sold me on purchasing the business of the Annapolis Marine Art Gallery was an aerial photo taken of the gallery in the midst of the boat show. And I knew immediately this was a business in the right place, with the right subject matter, and it would be a success. So we've been in business for 40 years now, and it has been a joy. I love going to work. And when people come into the gallery and I can tell they're new to Annapolis, I say, have you been to Williamsburg? And they say, oh, sure, yeah, we love historical places. I said, well, Annapolis is somewhat like Williamsburg. The only difference is people really live in the historic district. And so, that being said, I think it's important to note that any retail business, and particularly in the closed-in environment of historical districts, narrow streets, intimate living, if you will, it's important to remember that access is key to any retail business. And if I had access to a skywriter, you remember that old Sidney Poitier movie, writing in letters and 1,000 feet high, access is what I would write with my skywriting airplane. It's important, it's vital to any business, even in these days of the digital age. Apple just today announcing its addition to the retail environment. You need access to physical businesses like ours where people come in and they want to experience, they want to be in the presence of art before they buy, particularly of art of any price. So that being said, I want to leave the City Council and everyone assembled here. Access is the key word that I'd like to leave with you tonight. So thank you so much to the City Council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
And we'll be in business. Be there.
City Attorney, next item on the agenda, please.
The next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with reports by committees.
I think we have something lined up. Well, Alderman Finlayson first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee met last month. No, this month, March 26th. Nope, that's today. Anyway. Last week, sorry. We took up several pieces of legislation. Before we did, we gave a favorable recommendation to Nadine Sheehan to be reappointed to the Board of Appeals and Jennifer Beard to the Civil Service Board. We took up 04218 sidewalk signs with a favorable recommendation. We also took up CA 119 with a favorable recommendation, and R4515, which we sent to all the respective committees for further discussion. The next meeting of the Rules and City Government Committee will be on Tuesday, April 19th at 4 o'clock here in Council Chambers. Thank you. Oh, you want me to do LGAG now also?
Yes, thank you.
Gladly. Last week, from the 20th through the 21st, I had the pleasure of attending, and if I could get some help handing out materials, we had our quarterly LGAG meeting, which is the Local Government Advisory Committee, that is made up of 6 elected officials from all of the Headwater states, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, and the District of Columbia. Last week we met in Laurel, Delaware, and usually we go to a different site every 3 months so that we can see best practices in each of those locations. We had the benefit of hearing from 3 mayors from the Eastern Shore, the mayor of Salisbury, the mayor of Cambridge, and the mayor of Laurel, Delaware, who shared with us the efforts that they are involved in as far as cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay. We also had a report from Karen Bislin, who is with the EPA. She speaks to us at least quarterly, and we probably hear from Karen more regularly than that, and shared with us the funding that Congress is allocating for the EPA and asking for our assistance in making sure that the funding stays intact. EPA funding comes down to the local jurisdiction through local grants, so it's important that that $78 million that's being allocated for the EPA remain intact, because then we will reap the benefit. We also heard as part of Karen's report, information about the new WIP for the Conowingo Dam. I think all of us remember July of last year how our city dock looked when they opened the dam, and how all of the debris ended up, and we feel like it was all of the debris. It really wasn't, but it was far more devastating to us to see our city dock covered in debris. So there is a WIP now, a watershed implementation plan on the Conowingo Dam. I think we're all aware that Exelon is being sued by the governor so that they will pay for cleaning up of the dam, so that when the dam is opened, or whichever of their gates are open, we don't reap the dangers of all of that. Absolutely. They're countersuing, of course, because they say we were, being the state of Maryland, was asleep at the wheel and we should have known ahead of time. So those legal fights are continuing to go on. But very interesting, we have a new member from Maryland, Mr. Fritsch from Denton, Maryland. And he shared with us that what we witnessed last year is what they have been seeing for years and years and years on the Eastern Shore. Whenever the dam has opened, the Eastern Shore, I guess because of the winds, have been inundated with the same kind of debris. And it's not new. It's new for us, at least to the degree that we saw it last year. But they have been dealing with this for many, many years. And so it was kind of interesting that we hadn't heard anything about that, and that there aren't any efforts from their perspective to fight that. But since we now have a representative from the Eastern Shore on LGAG, I'm sure it's going to be on everybody's radar. So anyway, I just wanted to give you an update. What you have in front of you now is kind of an overview of the Chesapeake Bay program. This is we are the local government. And so our responsibility as a committee is to keep our issues and our needs in front of the governors. And so here, the first article speaks to tree canopy. You have a copy of the EPA's budget, which I mentioned. So you can look to see how the items in this budget impact us And please reach out to your congressman to tell them to fully fund the EPA. And then the last item that I handed out to you, thank you, Ms. Green, is the latest edition of the Bay Journal. So, want to keep it in front of us so that we're aware of the efforts that are going on. And I guess the next draft of the whip is due in August, so there'll be more information coming at our next meeting in June. Thank you. Question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Audit Committee met last Monday morning, and am I allowed to announce that we've selected? I think I am, but... Okay. We have selected...
Why don't you just say we've selected a firm without saying what firm, because the contract
Yes.
hasn't been executed?
We have selected a firm to conduct our first audit. We hope to commence with that, well, frankly, as soon as the money's available. We'll get started on it. It should take, Madam City Manager, I believe in the neighborhood of 60 days. Yeah, 60.
I don't remember. I want to say 60 to 90.
To complete, and we're on our way in the Audit Committee. Thank you. We are, by the way, lobbying very hard to get a much larger allowance in next year's budget, but we'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give a report on the last Environmental Matters Committee meeting. We met March 20th last week, and most of the meeting was spent talking about the Forest Drive Eastport sector study. About an hour and a half worth, just a discussion about some of the larger issues, environmental. We tried to focus on the environmental issues and went through the environmental principal solutions sheet. And that was a discussion with the public, and I would like to invite anybody from the public who'd like to come to the next meeting, which is going to be April 17th at 3 p.m. Assuming the sector, well, if the sector study with resolution is not withdrawn, then we will be obviously having this conversation. But the next meeting, we plan on talking about specific amendments to the sector study. And I also wanted to mention at the last meeting, we received a report from our Office of Environmental Policy. They had an intern look at legislation from jurisdictions in Maryland to see what they've done around plastic bags. They looked to see if anybody did a ban or a fee. Most jurisdictions in Maryland have opted for a fee on plastic bags, and sometimes it does go towards, usually it goes towards some kind of fund, like a watershed restoration fund, or in DC it goes towards the Anacostia Restoration Fund. So I believe that office will be working on some other recommendations coming out of their research, but that information is public if anybody wants to review it. But that's hopefully something we may be working on in the next, over the next year. Other than that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pendle-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Safety Committee last met on March 4th, 2019 at 6 p.m. and our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April the 1st, 6 p.m. right here in City Council chambers. Thank you.
Alderman Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee mercifully has been more or less on cruise control, awaiting the delivery of your budget on the 8th of April. We meet bi-monthly, and we'll be meeting next on April 3rd at 10:30 here in council chambers.
Thank you. Teresa's on top of that.
I thought it was because of your leadership that we were on cruise control.
Alderwoman Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Housing and Human Welfare Committee met on March 19th. We did take under review the Eastport Forest Drive sector study. We did propose 4 amendments to the study. We proposed amendments to Chart 12.2.4. We proposed an expansion to portion B5. We also proposed amendments on page 53 as well. We hope to have the amendments uploaded so that the public and our colleagues may have the benefit of seeing the amendments proposed by the committee. I know that myself and Alderwoman Tierney look forward to taking a look at the sector study from the other aspects of the committees that we are a part of as well, but we did take a look at it from the Housing and Human Welfare perspective and found it appropriate to recommend 4 amendments to the sector study. The next meeting of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee is on Tuesday, April 16th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. Thank you.
Alderman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Transportation Committee met last week. We had my colleagues, Alderwoman Finlayson, Alderman Savage, and Alderman Arnett in attendance as well. We reviewed several pieces of legislation, 04718 special events for the purpose of amending the definition of city-sponsored event. We recommended that favorably. 0319 sidewalk, snow, and ice removal, the fine reconciliation with the fee schedule was recommended favorably. However, there was a consideration to amend it to address the elderly and handicapped that may not be able to shovel, and that subsequently got law office review. We also took on 07-19 special parking permit for contractors, etc., and that was recommended favorably. And finally, we reviewed the Forest Drive sector study as it relates to transportation and the titles that we were responsible for. It was a discussion. We had Sally Nash and Pete Gutwall, Director Gordon in attendance, as well as my colleagues. We attempted to propose to approve the acceptable elements as they related to transportation, just to appease planning and zoning as far as the principles, but it was suggested that we wait until my colleague, Alderwoman Ron Pendle Charles, reviewed with her colleagues because of her proximity not only to Forest Drive, but of her concerns with the county overlap in their responsibilities. Next meeting is April 11th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Economic Matters Committee met on March 14th. We recommended favorably the reappointment of Matthew Evans to the Building Board of Appeals, and we recommended favorably 04218 sidewalk signs, which is for the purpose of authorizing sidewalk signs with certain conditions and providing a definition of sidewalk sign and providing for delayed effective date of the sidewalk sign permit fee. We also added to the agenda that day presentation on R1119, which is the Urban Land Institute report. Ms. Eileen Fogarty was there to present. We didn't take any action on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, please.
The next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
Okay, we have 3 people. First, Anastasia. Please come forward, state your name and address. Thank you.
Is this on?
Is it a green light there? Yep.
There we go.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for welcoming us all this evening. My name is Anastasia Hopkins-son. I live at 1036 Harbor Drive in Annapolis, and I'm the Vice President of the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation, which represents homeowners, communities, and individuals in the city and the county. We have been we respectfully request, actually, and I'm taking advantage of public comments to say that when you consider the withdrawal of Resolution 45, the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study, we respectfully request that you do withdraw that resolution from legislation. We've been working with the Eastport Civic Association and other parties to address many concerns with this study. And this evening, I've written volumes on this to the Planning Commission. This evening, I just want to address one topic, which is the scope of the study. The sector study covered 2/3 of the city's land area, its population, its households, and its resident workers. This is a far greater scope than a sector study ought to review. By our estimate, the sector study newly characterizes the land use of 167 acres of privately owned properties for the study area. Yet, the sector study's guiding document, the 2009 Comprehensive Plan, recommended study of only about 20 acres. That is to say, for this area, 14 acres in the Bay Village Opportunity Area and about 6 acres in the Forest Drive Opportunity Area, plus in that area, the Catherine properties, which I kind of set aside because one hopes that's water under the bridge. This increased area of study has far greater importance and impacts on the quality of life and should not be the subject of a mere sector study. The sector study evaluated most of the city and is, in effect, a mini comprehensive plan, in my opinion. But it lacks one critical element: citizen participation at the neighborhood level. Neighborhoods will be significantly impacted by the increased density and increased building heights proposed by most of the study areas, but the residents have not been engaged in any such planning. The sector study bit off more than it could chew by recommending changes in policy and practices and in land use for most of the city. It has far too many issues and too little public participation. So we encourage you to not amend the sector study to the 2009 Comprehensive Plan, nor to commit more staff time to another edition of the sector study, especially as the 2019 Comprehensive Plan is due this year. Rather, the sector study may be used as preliminary research for the development of the 2019 Comprehensive Plan. And I would point out that the county began its version of a comprehensive plan, which is called the General Development Plan, the GDP, in September of 2017, and are now even expanding under the leadership of the new county executive their citizen participation in the plan. So I would encourage you to not continue to attempt to correct the sector study to make it fit into a 10-year-old plan, but instead use it moving forward and get the 2019 comp plan going. We've asked Sally Nash what the schedule for that is, and we're hoping to hear from her this week.
Thank you. Anastasia, Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Hopkinson. I do have a few questions for you. I think that's a good point you raised about the county already having started their GDP process. Personally, I would rather have us roll this into and just start our comp plan rather than spending all the time on this sector study. But in any case, my two questions, my first question has to do with, you commented on, you said it lacks one critical element, citizen participation at the neighborhood level. I was just wondering if you could tell me more about that, because I know that we've been told Plan and Zoning has conducted, I think, around 40 meetings. So are you referring to something else when you're talking about citizen participation on the neighborhood level?
Yeah, I've talked to many dozens of residents of the sector area, especially on Forest Drive. And when I show them the study and explain it to them, they hadn't even heard of it. It affects their neighborhood directly, and they are concerned about that, somewhat dismayed that so much is being planned and they don't know about it. They are willing to get involved, and would like to support, you know, the planning effort for their neighborhood. They feel they have needs and would appreciate leadership from the city. But their concerns are that what they see of the plan is that their houses, in some cases, their neighborhoods certainly will be directly impacted. Schools, they're worried about what's going to happen to the schools. I couldn't say anything because there was nothing in the plan about that. They wanted to know about what would happen with traffic. I couldn't say anything because there's really nothing in the plan about what will happen with traffic. And people just want to know what's going on, and they're upset that they haven't heard about it. Now, the planning department made an effort to reach out to people, but you really got to get on the street. You got to talk to people where they live. You just can't, I don't know what, hold a meeting in City Hall and expect a neighborhood to show up. And there, if you look at the sector study, the map on page 52, look at all those areas that are designated for change, the little brown blobs and the orange blobs that go up Forest Drive. Those are houses in stable neighborhoods where people have a strong interest in maintaining and improving their community. They'll work with you, but don't like having plans made for them when they don't participate in it. Even so.
Yeah, thank you. And my second question, when I've heard you speak before, you've mentioned concerns about affordable housing in relation to the study, but I didn't see you mention that in here. Do you still have concerns or recommendations regarding affordable housing?
Yeah, it was a matter that I brought up at the public hearing by the Planning Commission on November 1st. And we talked about it for some time at that hearing, but it was rather a superficial conversation. It was real obvious none of us knew what we were talking about. What's really needed is some, you know, real study of the topic. Where could we get a workforce affordable housing in the city of Annapolis, in the sector study area? We'd welcome it on Forest Drive. But it needs a group of people committed with goals, committed to action, and a task force organization, basically. But it is something that can happen and should happen for the given demographics of the city. But if we don't plan for it, it's not going to happen. We need people committed to making it happen. And that would be, I believe, a task force or not a committee. Somebody that does something, because it's, you know, you're building.
Thank you.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Hopkinson, Alderman Savage asked the same exact question I was going to ask. And just for the record, I have reached out to Ward 3 community associations, Greater Parole Community Association, Heritage Community and Pool Community Association, Fairfax Road Community Association, and they're all extraordinarily interested in working on some things that they are very interested in what's going on with this study. Also reached out to 1901 West Street Residents Association, Oxford Landing, HOA, and also the Annapolis Design District, which is right off of Chicopee. So I hear what you're saying, and preliminarily, I think what you're saying is a good idea, possibly for that task force, because I've gotten a lot of feedback from at least half of the ones I've reached out to, and this was just last week when I did.
Right.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, I find your ward very interested in what's happening because they're around Chinkopin, and that is characterized as an insolvable bottleneck, which only going to get worse. That's why they call it, and they want something to help them. And I think there are possibilities.
And as I indicated last week, it definitely bleeds over into the Upper West Street sector study because we're talking about abutting the county line, and we have in Ward 3 city, county, as well as state roadways. So that kind of brings a whole lot of other agency and partners into the mix. So that makes it a little more difficult to try to solve or resolve this situation.
Right, and that also, by the way, that old Solomon Island Road proposals kind of confused us because it's not in really it's out of scope for what was initially thought to be the sector area. Apparently there's great interest in development there, so it needs to be properly planned. At that area on Old Solomon Island Road, they're planning an urban center. That's 4 to 8-story buildings. Think parole center.
Don't think so.
I don't think so.
No.
The burden on,
Don't think so.
but we shouldn't plan for it if we're not going to do it.
Don't think so.
Yeah.
But also, I had requested too, because since the study went eastward into even the county, of course it would impact the county, I had asked for 2 additional things early on, but they're going to work on it, for the study to also go out to Riva Road on Forest Drive, because they were talking about an intermodal transit center that may be off of Riva Road, not sure, but also that the study also include that portion of Forest Drive from Fairfax Road crossing to Old Solomon's Island as well. And that's a residential community that was not addressed. So there are some gaps, at least from the Ward 3 standpoint.
Yes.
And the fear of the Ward 3 residents is if we do a lot within the other wards within the city, everything kind of balloons out onto that Chicwa pin, and then we're really in a bad situation out there. So I hear what you're saying, and preliminarily I agree with what you're saying based on the feedback that I've gotten over the past week.
Yes, it's
So thank you
accurate.
so much.
It's accurate how you describe that section of the city that around Chinkapin and Fairfax Road, and yeah, they get the burden of the rest of the city, and there needs to be somehow to address that.
Yes.
I hope the planners come up with some good ideas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alderman Arnett.
Well, first of all, I want to thank my colleague from Ward 3 for continuing to mention the fact that this, even though this is 2/3 of the city, it still isn't considering some very much impacted areas in Ward 3. While this study may be a good lead-in to the next comp plan, we really do have to look at all the moving parts. And I am very concerned about what happens in Ward 3 vis-a-vis traffic, at least. You raised a very good point. The report talks about 40 different meetings. I went to a lot of them. I saw you at all of those. And yet, so many people still seem to be unaware of it. I can assure you, and we'll hear a couple of voices from Eastport, that Eastport isn't unaware of it, but I know you've been going door to door and talking to people, and thank you for that heroic effort, but how do we get people to understand? It's so much of our career is spent hearing from people, why didn't you tell me? If only I had known. I know the planning department and the contractor went to great effort to get people to meetings and get the word out, and yet there are so many people that still seem unaware. Any suggestions on how we can get people activated at the right time? Maybe a little premature depending upon what we do tonight, but at the right time, get people energized on this issue?
Well, my view is that, like, you have an event in your ward, the town hall.
Yes.
And
I'm having one on the 18th of April to discuss development writ large, not necessarily this study, but the whole discussion about development.
So we do a lot of information for people, but AMPF has always been informing what's going on. But what we are learning is that in order to engage people, you have to have them do something, a small task. And I love your town halls because people get together, they express their views, and sometimes they unravel a knotty question in group format. I've been thinking that in neighborhoods, we should have like a town hall, but a planning session where a neighborhood can address what do the planners think would be good for them, what do they think would be good for themselves, and what are the variables? And how does their neighborhood fit into the whole? Because the comprehensive plan shows us the whole, and that's the great benefit. But they want to see their neighborhood, and I think that kind of a meeting. So you do go door to door knocking, asking them to come to a meeting, and then they come to a meeting, you make it attractive and fun, like your town halls, and lively. But you solve problems with people, their neighborhood problems, with them in their communities. That's my view. I'm not I'm not an expert on it. It's just what I've been thinking about as I walk up and down the streets, talking to people and hearing what their needs are. They want to be involved. But there are a lot of people. How are you going to do all that? Well, organize them.
I don't think anyone can hold a candle to you with your last meeting, which was pretty lively.
Right, well, we're happy
But
to
we
have
will
them.
be having it, and Rob has good town hall meetings as well, so.
Right.
But we have to figure out a way to get people to understand this is going to affect their neighborhood and their home in a very direct way, hopefully a very positive way. I don't think anybody's trying to plan to do negative things to people, but we may not have the full picture and full understanding of their druthers, so we have to keep working on it. But thank you for your efforts.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hopkins, thank you. Next up, Deborah Dillon, please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and alderpersons. My name is Debbie Dillon, and I live at 320 State Street in Annapolis. I'm the president of the Eastport Civic Association. I'm here today to respectfully ask that you vote to withdraw R4518, the resolution to amend the Forest Drive sector study to the 2009 comprehensive plan. And furthermore, I ask that the council, and again, if this is legislatively possible, the council support the mayor's letter to remand the study back to the Planning Commission. So the reason I ask that is there's many questions that have been raised by both the standing committees of the council and citizens groups. And as I understand it, the draft document of the sector study will be a source document for the 2019 comprehensive plan. So it seems to me that we need to address the questions in the sector study before we use it as any sort of an information source for the 2019 comprehensive plan. I've spoken to you before about the concerns that people in Eastport have with the sector study, some of them being community character and how it's defined or redefined in this study, traffic, and funding mechanisms for some of the proposed improvements. So I won't talk on that again, but I would like to further delve into the whole discussion around the number of community meetings that have been held and the responses. I think that, as Anastasia said, it's the wrong kind of meeting. Well, I also think that comments were given at those meetings, and they weren't heard. So the disconnect is you can ask people for comment, but they have to be heard and incorporated into the document. And I think people feel to a large extent that that did not happen. And I just refer to the section in the document that says, step 4 in the planning process, did we get it right? And I think a large number of people have said, no, we need to go back and relook at this, and that's what we need to do, and that's what I'm asking you to do. Thank you.
Alderman Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your comments. I would ask, I don't know how many of the meetings you went to. I didn't get to all of them, but I do not remember a meeting where there was a discussion of community character and changing community character, which I think if all of this report, page 52, is the nexus. That's the one that shows the map changing with colors that change community character all throughout the corridor. I asked, did you hear any of that discussion?
No, and I think that the definition of community character, I don't think that the general public understands, and I don't fully understand it, and I need to learn more. I don't understand form-based zoning. I need to know more about that, and I think the city has an obligation to educate us so that we understand what it is that they're proposing, and I don't think that's been done fully. So I don't think the definition of community character, as I read the document, is defined enough for me and for many people in Eastport.
Well, maybe we'll get into that a little bit on the 18th, but I do think that if we get a redo, we ought to get to the first principles of this study, and the first principle to me is we're changing the character of the corridor, and I think we need to solicit input from the people who would be affected by that. And again, I know Eastport is lucky because we have the Civic Association. Other neighborhoods don't have such an organized, oh, my time is up. Such an organized process, but I think the city has to think about. I'll see you later. We have to think about a process so that we don't continue to have that refrain. I didn't know this is what was going to happen. And I thank the Civic Association for your efforts, but I think my colleagues and I and the department need to think about some better way to broadcast. Maybe we can get the Office of Emergency Management to do a 311 call or something. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Next up, Bill Reichard, come forward. State your name and address. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Reichard. I live at 717 Bay Ridge Avenue in Eastport, Annapolis. I am the chairman of the recently developed subcommittee of the Eastport Civic Association devoted to planning and major development. And I wanted to use my few minutes this evening to address some of the issues that have been raised so far, but do that more particularly. One of the reasons that you have this vote tonight is because we realize, and you now realize, that the code required the City Council to make a decision on the Eastport sector study within 90 days of the time that Planning and Zoning certified a copy to this council. And we're out of time. So the context of the decision to remand to the Planning Commission and to further determine whether or not you keep a resolution to amend a 10-year-old comprehensive plan, the context of that decision is we're out of time. So it's a little bit of a hurry-up drill. We understand that. I think you understand that. I mention that because I think that circumstance actually gives us an opportunity. My committee, which represents a number of people from various backgrounds, history in Annapolis, expertise in numerous different areas, spent a lot of time. They're a citizens group. They're working people who happen to live in Eastport and care about Annapolis. They are the archetypal working citizen. Way before January, they attended all the meetings. They took all the notes. They did follow-up meetings with Planning and Zoning. They talked to our aldermen. They reached out to some of you. They researched on their own. They did legal research on their own. They looked at other cities. And they came together with a remarkable level of energy and expertise. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because that exists at the citizen level all throughout our city. In February, they sent each of you and Mayor Buckley a memorandum on the sector study. One thing I'm very proud of my committee for is they actually read the sector study. I read it twice, and I will share with you, if you're having trouble falling asleep, start reading the sector study. Okay. It's not easy. But it is an important document. you, spent a lot of money on what everybody says in conversations is an important topic, and that is the future of our neighborhoods, the future of our development. What are we going to do with Chicopee Round Road? What are we going to do? What are we going to do about development and making it affordable? People write, we all write letters to the editor and columns in the Capitol, and people are legitimately concerned about whether or not development in this city generates net revenue from taxes. It's a legitimate question. Some people think it really does. Well, we have no data to prove that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think we need to know. The sector study is deficient in some areas. When we read it and look around our neighborhoods and talk to our neighbors, we recognize what those are. In February, we sent you a memorandum. We sent it to you, we sent it to the mayor, we sent it to planning and zoning. We don't have a response. We met with Mayor Buckley several weeks ago, and he kindly met with Debbie Dillon and I, and we went through this. And he has promised us a written response from the city, and we thank you for that, Mayor. And we expect it. Here's the point. The question was asked earlier. At this stage, how do we go forward in a meaningful way between government and citizens? When the answer about public participation, when the answer is we held meetings, you went to the meetings, I went to the meetings, those are informational meetings. Those were softball questions on questionnaires that say, what's most important to you? And is it really any surprise to anybody that traffic was the overwhelming concern of the person who walked into those meetings? No. That is not, we are beyond that now. We know that. We have that data. We're beyond that. We made a recommendation. We don't have a response yet. I'd like to have one. One of the 5 recommendations we made in our memorandum is that a task group, a citizen government task group, be formed to address some of your questions and our questions relative to this sector study, that include people from the county and from the city. We are not talking about softball questions. We are talking about a mechanism which allows good faith effort, energetic participation by citizens and government and consultants and planning and zoning to address the very questions that you have, that we have. We have the same questions. Okay. People worry about jobs and development in their wards. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about transportation. But I am here to tell you that we can use our current circumstance to take another meaningful next step. And in my opinion, and my respectful suggestion to you, is that we use the activism that is now developing in these communities. You see it in your wards. There are people who want to work. There are people who have been working. We need to work with you, and you need to tell us, how do we do that? How do we move forward? Because unless that happens, unless citizens are given the opportunity to work with government in that way, this will be a meaningless exercise, and it is bound to fail because there is no buy-in. You want to get a point across in the neighborhood, you get people who live in the neighborhood to spread the word. That's how it's done. And we're here to help you and work with you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you. First of all, I was a little embarrassed when about a month ago you mentioned to me that you hadn't got a response back from me. Certainly, of all the alderpersons, you should have gotten a response back from me. And I started thinking about it and realized we don't really have a mechanism for the alderpersons to give independent. We can send back an email, and we can certainly acknowledge easily enough that we've received this. I did put a hard copy of this on all of my colleagues' chair when we were talking about it. But I will say, for all 5 of these requests, and I'll enumerate them, cost estimates for the solution, forming a joint city, county, state committee, not just we've talked to them, but we actually have a committee that is covering all those jurisdictions, working on mandatory fees from the developers. I'm meeting with the city attorney as soon as she gets her legs under to work on impact fee legislation. We don't have that. We're talking about implementation of the unfulfilled requirements in the traffic study and completing the computer traffic model, which is one of the things. First of all, I think we should recognize, while there's some things that are concerning in this study, in my view, there's some pretty big advances. The whole discussion in Appendix C, looking at different ways to model traffic, the whole implementation section in Appendix E, which actually helped me understand when I started looking at solutions, what the problems were I was having with the recommendations, because I started realizing a lot of these solutions would never materialize. There wasn't the money for it, and there wasn't the right authority. But I will say to you, out of my embarrassment of not getting back to you sooner, we are working on it. And I actually have to give my colleagues a lot of credit. Every one of the council members has taken this to heart, and we have put in a lot of effort. We're not there yet. I think tonight we're going to give ourselves some more time. We're going to officially vote to support the mayor's letter to remand back, I hope we'll vote for that, to the Planning Commission for more study. I think we're going to have our committees giving the Planning Commission some of the kinds of things that we need more information, more input from them on. But I promise you I will get you a hard copy response to your memorandum as soon as I can.
I appreciate that. And I just want to very briefly respond from this perspective. Would we like a response? Yes. As important, even perhaps more important than that, I want to share with you a concern. The concern is, on the questions that were raised, this is true in every ward, not just Eastport. I know that because I talk to people in other wards, okay? There are people in this community that are doing the work that can sit down with you or your designees or whoever you tell us to talk to. Who's the point person? Who do we talk to share ideas? We think we have answers to some of those questions. We think we know something about the law in the city of Annapolis about what authority you have to order developers to do anything relative to contribution. We have looked at that. All I'm saying to you, as important as a response is, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, we're not waiting for you, okay?
Good.
We're waiting for you to really tell us how to join with you. That's what we're waiting for. Give us a mechanism, give us a point person, tell us who to talk to, and let's get on with the getting on, you know. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. Next up, Guy Schaefer. Please come forward, state your name and address, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Guy Schaefer. I live in Bay Woods of Annapolis. I'm a retired naval officer and subsequently that a successful individual in major industries. I'm not going to take a lot of your time because all I would be doing would be repeating what you've already heard. But I would like to talk a little bit. I ran in the Navy. I was a part of 2 studies and ran 2 other studies dealing with major issues. And my comments are, the study you have in front of you today is not a study. It is a proposal. It is a one-view proposal that does not look at all of the particular options that are available to you. And all of those options will impact the residents. Now, I'm going to mention 2 things. Most of you are too young to remember the first one, but I'll mention 2 things. Remember the Edsel. Ford built a car that nobody wanted, and they lost an awful lot of money. The more recent one is the state of California, which wants to build a high-speed railroad between San Francisco and LA, and they've just given up on it because they can't afford it. None of the issues that are involved in those 2 attempts have been addressed in this study. There's no risk analysis. There's no definition of when you have built it, nobody has done any research to find out whether anybody want to live in it. Where are the children going to play in these urban centers that they're going to build? There are no playgrounds around them. How are you going to handle the traffic? How is it going to change your zoning laws? None of these things are addressed in the study. I'm not going to repeat myself because most of you heard it all again, but this study is not ready to be for prime time, and it should be withdrawn. And if you're making change of any kind, the most important thing you do is market it. And this study has not, and the change has not been marketed by the people who need to market it to the citizens. You've heard a number of suggestions today on how that can be corrected. I endorse every one of them. I really think that it's time to go back and start over again with this study. Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer, Alderman Savage would like to ask you a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Schaefer, for coming out tonight. I did have a few questions for you.
Sure.
So, first of all, can you give me an understanding of how the Baywoods residents feel? Because I think I recall seeing a petition that was signed by a number of residents in your community.
Well, I have a daughter who is was for many years a senior vice president in charge of strategic planning for a very large advertising agency, and now she is teaching at the postgraduate level. Whenever that advertising agency was doing a new product, preparing a new advertising campaign, they held focus groups. You have never held a true focus group here for this study. I have been to several of those meetings, and the people who attended those meetings were the same group, and they weren't representative of most of the wards in this town. Nobody was invited to any of these meetings from the parts of the town that will be affected but are not going to receive any of the benefits. For example, if you build urban centers with more shops and more stores along Forest Drive, what's going to happen to downtown Annapolis? Downtown Annapolis right now is filled with little more than tourist traps in the way of stores. Anybody who wants to buy have their shoes repaired, anybody who wants to have their clothes pressed, comes down, goes either to Parole or it goes to West Street, out far, or they come to the area you've got now. You're not selling this just to Forest Drive and Eastport, you're selling it to the whole city of Annapolis. And they all are going to have an interest in this, because if you fill this new urban area with all the young people in town, they're not going to go to West Street anymore, there's no parking. They'll come to in fact, if I were some of the entertainment centers on West Street, I'd be looking at how I can move out to Forest Drive, because that's the easy place to get for the young people. It's not just a Forest Drive, Bay Ridge, Eastport study. It is a citywide study. There's no risk analysis in it. What happens if none of this materializes and you spend a lot of money? You're doing this in conjunction with a county, and the county has never had any input into this. How can you do a study unless you analyze the risks. Interestingly enough, this morning, I listened to a radio report that says in the next 10 years, the rainfall in this part of the United States is going to increase by 20%. What's that going to do to stormwater management if you pave everything with urban centers? There's a whole number of this, the country as a whole is changing from the country of 30, 40, 50 years ago to the new country. What it's going to be like. There are not going to be people going to shops anymore. I can buy anything I need on the internet. So why are we building more stores and shops? These are the questions that haven't been answered in this study. I've been to the meetings and I have a copy of the study. I've read it 3 times. And let me tell you, it's tough reading. But you really need to sit back and say, what do we want to accomplish, and set down, if I want to accomplish this, what are the requirements and what are the risks? And none of that has been done.
Now, Baywoods had a specific concern. One of your concerns, I believe, had to do with your employees being able to get to your place of residence if some of the...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So I believe Baywoods had a specific concern about employees being able to get to your residence.
Baywoods, first of all, to describe it for you all, Baywoods has a population of about 250 residents. Baywoods has 143 full-time equivalent employees. What you are doing here is going to impact every one of those employees because most of them live in Ward 6, 5, or 4. There's no bus service to Baywoods now. So every one of those 143 workers has to come by car to Baywoods. You're now in the process of looking at putting a kindergarten daycare center on Forest Drive with 117 spaces to be occupied and 50 additional staff. Where are they going to park? All of that is going to impact stormwater management. All of that is going to impact traffic. And the study leads you to believe that all of that is going to be easily handled. Most of it, Forest Drive, is under the county's control. And those of us who were at a meeting recently found out that the county has no plan to improve Forest Drive. Before you build what you're talking about building, you need to have the infrastructure in place. And one of the places to spend money immediately is on the intersection between Chinkopeen Round Road and Forest Drive. That should be a 2-level intersection, so that Forest Drive feeds right through it and you go under it to merge. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm not criticizing the people who did the work. And I'm not criticizing it other than to say they were given some imperfect direction to start with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would like to speak? Please come forward. Seeing no motion in the chamber, I declare comments by the general public closed. Ms. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is update from the mayor.
To start, I'd like to say a few words about an Annapolis police officer who passed away last week after a battle with cancer. Officer First Class Steve Sugg spent 32 years in law enforcement in Maryland, the last 8 with the Annapolis Police Department. Officer Sugg served in the Patrol Division and Criminal Investigation Section here in the city. He was twice awarded Officer of the Month in February 2012 and December 2015. He also received a crime reduction ribbon and a commendatory letter. Officer Sugg's wife of 28 years, Darlene, predeceased him in 2014. He is survived by his daughter, Megan, his son, Stephen, and a grandson. At 53 years old, he has gone too soon. He will be missed by his family, by his extended law enforcement family, by his friends, and by our city. Rest in peace, Officer Sugg. Let's observe a moment of silence for him. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. I hope everyone enjoyed our Maryland Day holiday yesterday. The reason we are having a Tuesday City Council meeting, it was way back in 1634 that the English ship the Ark and the Dove landed in what they named St. Clements Island in St. Mary's County, bringing 150 colonists to these shores. The city of Annapolis was founded a mere 15 years later. This year we will celebrate 325 years after the city was granted a charter. Happy Maryland Day. Maryland Day continues this weekend. I encourage you to visit marylandday.org, where you can learn about the free offerings for families Friday through Sunday in Annapolis. There will be a flag raising ceremony on City Dock at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Watermark Tours is offering free 2-mile walking tours around the historic district. Banneker Douglas Museum is free and open to the public. Get into the Chesapeake Children's Museum for just $1. The Pride of Baltimore will be at City Dock and is free to visit on Saturday and Sunday. St. John's College will have an exhibit of regional artists at the Mitchell Gallery, which is entirely free. Charles Carroll House is free, William Packer House and garden tours are just $1. African American history walking tours at Susan B. Campbell Park are free. You get the idea? Check out the website at marylandday.org. The word is free. And enjoy an extended Maryland Day weekend with your friends and family. I was pleased to see the police department's scholarship fundraising at Market House last Wednesday was a huge success. I understand they raised more than $20,000. Congratulations and a big shout out to the man in the back there, Lieutenant Krause, Kevin Krause. Let's give for organising a great event for a great cause with a great outcome. There are so many deserving young people in our community. I know these college and trade school funds will help them have a better life. I was honoured to attend and mingle with people who were so generous in their giving. Be on the lookout for scholarship applications and deadlines with a link from the city website annapolis.gov. Also on Wednesday we had the inaugural meeting of the Urban Land Institute, ULI, City Dock Action Group and working teams. Thanks to Robert Clark and Eileen Fogarty for their hard work on assembling the volunteers needed to work on and implement strategy and an action plan for City Dock. We've given them a few months to have meetings and deliver a report with specific action items. You'll get a final report to the City Council by October. I look forward to the report, and I'm sure you all do. Earlier this month, we launched a website for OD-free Annapolis at annapolis.gov. This is a third of a 3-prong in our strategy to combat opioid addiction. First, we have the Naptown Anti-Dope Movement for community engagement in the African American community. Our next event for the Naptown Anti-Dope is this Saturday, March 30, with Alderman Fred Paone. That will be at the Stanton Center from 11 to 3 p.m. Second, we have Your Life Matters, where we offer Narcan administration and CPR training to anyone who asks for it. And the third is OD Free Annapolis, a website that is a clearinghouse for information resources, treatment, and even real-time statistics and GIS data on where the overdoses have happened. I'd like to thank MK Sabrowski at the Office of Emergency Management for her work in getting the site launched. If you or a loved one is having difficulty with substance abuse, I urge you to reach out to the city resources. There are people here who care and people who can help. Last night, we had our first community forum for discovering from residents their priorities in our search for a new police chief. Turnout was beyond what we had hoped, with around 100 people showing up at the American Legion post on Forest Drive. I'd like to thank Bishop Craig Coates for facilitating this unique community conversation. Perhaps the most importantly, I'd like to thank everyone who came out ready to share their thoughts and ideas. I hope the members of the City Council who attended, Alderwoman Finlayson, Alderwoman Pendell Charles, Alderwoman Tierney, and Alderman Fred Paone, I hope you found the meeting successful as I did. There are 3 more to go in this series: on April 1 at the Eastport Fire Station, on April 2 at Pip Moyer Rec Centre, and April 4 at Mount Olive Church. They all start at 7 p.m. I encourage the public to come out and join the conversation. We also had the inaugural meeting of the Waterways Cabinet last Thursday. I'd like to recognise Alderman Rob Savage for his vision and his leadership around this issue. This body will meet several times a year. They are stakeholders from the community, along with officials and staff from the city. I expect we will see meaningful work from this dynamic group as the collective voices of our waterways. A quick note on Arbor Day, which takes place on April 26th this year. Annapolis supports the Arbor Day Foundation Time for Trees initiative, with a goal to plant a total of 100 million trees across America by 2022. We need to plant trees at a scale like never before to combat deforestation, ameliorate the impacts of the climate change. Annapolis is already designated as a Tree City USA community, and as such, we will be encouraging you to plant and care for trees in our city. There's a popular Chinese proverb, which I have memorized. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Sorry. The second best time is now. The film festival was this past weekend. What a great event for our city. I always wish I could see more of the films, but many are on my list to catch later. Thank you to the founders, Lee Anderson and Patty White, for bringing this event to our town. It takes hundreds of festival volunteers and staff to manage this event, and they are to be commended for making it a destination event for visitors and a highlight for the year for locals. It was an incredibly diverse mix of films. We had an opportunity to have the filmmakers, directors, actors share the fruits of their labour, all while experiencing our city. Given the weather, the circulator approved by the council was very important. It was raining like crazy on Thursday night and the place was packed, which shows you that there is an appetite for these kind of cultural events. On April the 1st of this year, a full year out from the constitutionally mandated 2020 census, the City of Annapolis is partnering with Anne Arundel County to participate in a committee dedicated to getting a complete count for the county and city. As you know, when we don't count people, we lose out on program money. I look forward to working with County Executive Stuart Pittman's team to make sure that every person in Annapolis is counted next year. As an announcement, they are already hiring. They are good paying jobs that begin now. They pay a minimum of $21 an hour, and you can do much of the work from home. They need office managers, field directors, data analysts, and data analysts. Census.gov is the website. A note on the passing of former Maryland Governor Harry Hughes. There's been a lot said about the kind of government he sought to run, and the way he went about it restored confidence in government at a time when the people of Maryland were fatigued and distrustful. And I hope you're not fatigued by my long monologue today. So. Let's strive to be the best city government we can be for the people of Annapolis as a way to honour his legacy. And finally, on one last solemn note, we had a vigil in the city for yet another mass shooting. This time, the one in Christchurch, New Zealand, that took 50 lives. Each and every one of these mass shootings is heartbreaking for the victims and survivors, and I count our city as survivors. Time is passing, but there is always time to remember Rebecca, Wendy, Rob, Gerald, and John. We have to keep their memories alive, and we have to reach out to the survivors and remind them that they are in our hearts. Please be kind to one another. Thank you. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ID-5-19, required administrative submittals, presented by the City Manager.
Good evening. The only submittal for tonight is a budget transfer of $22,959.23 from law office salaries to law office legal services. This will allow the law office to pay for legal services provided by outside attorneys when there is a conflict of interest or when there is a need for specific expertise. There's sufficient money available in the salaries line item because we are now charging appropriately salaries for attorneys who are working on the self-insurance fund cases to the self-insurance fund. So this has no effect on the overall general fund budget.
Alderman Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had a discussion on the audit committee with the city, some members of the city attorney staff about encumbrances from the city attorney office, and Alderman Payon can correct me if my understanding or interpretation of that is incorrect. We were looking to kind of get the scope of the city's exposure, understanding what potential lawsuits were there, and if we had sufficient funds to cover the exposure. You gave us the breakdown of the actuarial determinations and how we cover for those things, our self-insurance, and then how we budget for that. How is this a new or unexpected expense that we're having with this? How did we get here at this point in the fiscal year?
So in the past, the assistant city attorneys that presented to the audit committee, their time has been charged to the general fund. But we should be, as we discussed at the audit committee, have reserves for legal expenses in the self-insurance fund, and their salaries working on cases that are part of the self-insurance fund should be posted against that reserve. That's why we have reserved that money. Actuary is aware of it. It's included in the actuary's calculations. So this frees up the general fund money that can then be used, and we had, I think, a couple of cases with the Board of Appeals or the Building Board of Appeals where Mr. Elson was the attorney representing the board, and the city attorney had to represent Mr. Gutwald. And so to create more of a wall between that representation, we want to hire outside legal counsel when the boards require it, and let the city attorney represent the city employee.
Is this money that we have already encumbered, or are we anticipating that before the end of the fiscal year?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, we're getting into matters that were discussed in a closed session of the audit committee. I don't think we ought to be talking about this.
No, we're not discussing any self-insurance fund cases, Mr. Payan. I mean, I'll defer to the city attorney if we're saying something we shouldn't be saying in public session.
Well, it was in a closed session, and I think it's just that.
But
Let's get the city attorney to.
Yeah, so far, I haven't heard any questions or discussions, thank you, about issues that would be confidential, although I certainly understand what you're saying. There's a point at which
Let's just be
you go
very
beyond.
careful, that's all.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Proceed, thank you.
So we have two cases right now, and I'm not sure if it's the Board of Appeals or the Building and Board of Appeals. I think it's one before each, where we need to or have hired outside legal counsel. This frees up the money to pay for those services.
Thank you.
Alderman Payan, do you want to say something?
I think I said quite enough, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Usually I'm suspicious of rounded up numbers, but tonight I'm questioning the pennies attached.
Jody and I have had this discussion often in the last week about pennies. This is literally taking budgeted hours times, actual hours times hourly rates with FICA,
Okay.
et cetera. I agree with you. Next year's budget instructions are no pennies.
Well, the numbers are just odd, just not even the
These are
pennies,
based
but
on
the
actual
dollars.
hours
Okay.
worked by
Okay.
the attorneys on the cases, and they will get posted against the cases on which they worked.
Okay, so they are posted against
Yes.
specific cases?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Ms. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar include AP-61-18, the appointment of Nadine Chien to the Board of Appeals, AP-67-18, the reappointment of Jennifer Beard to the Civil Service Board, AP-70-18, the reappointment of Matthew S. Evans III to the Building Board of Appeals, and the following first readers: 0-10-19, Maryland Public Information Act, R-13-19, filing of grant application with the Maryland Transit Administration. Second readers, CA-1-19, acting mayor designation, O-3-19, sidewalk snow and ice removal -fine, 0-7-19, special parking permit for transport shuttles and contractors -application procedure, 0-08-19, Grow Annapolis Inc. lease agreement, R-12-19, civil service positions and classifications risk management administrator.
Is there any objections to items on the consent calendar?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Buckley?
Yes.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles?
Yes.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderman Payam?
Aye.
So that's
Let's have it.
7 ayes and 2 yeses.
Yeah, there's a distinction.
All right, Ms. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is public hearings, beginning with ordinance O-4-19, special residential parking districts, parking permits.
Okay. We have 2 speakers. Megan Moore, is that right? Thank you. Please come forward and state your name and address. Thank you.
There we go. Hi, I'm Megan Moore, 86 Charles Street. I also own 58 Madison Place. I'm also a lifelong resident of downtown Annapolis for 43 years. I grew up on Conduit Street, and I currently own a retail store downtown, Easy Street Gallery. It's been my family business for 43 years, so I'm a bit of a unicorn, you know. I've lived in this town my whole entire life and spend basically all my time within a few block radius. So my biggest concern here today is I also property manage 3 short-term rentals in town: 144 Charles Street, 96 East Street, and 161 Conduit Street. All these properties are short-term rentals, and basically what this new legislation is trying to say is that for a residential parking permit, they want to do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alderman Tierney, but you want to do residential parking permits and you want to do non-residential parking permits. In order for a non-residential parking permit, it also can't be a short-term rental. So obviously, the owners of my properties don't live in state. Some have been residents who are currently transferred. Others have bought property down here with plans to retire. In between this, they rent out their property short-term, help pay the mortgage. It's not a new concept, I think, anywhere, but it's definitely growing. So basically, sorry, I'm going here. there's a need for it in town. I think on any given Navy football weekend, you can see that not only is every hotel booked, every bed and breakfast is booked, and every single one of my properties are booked. The people that come to town spend money in town, you know, they stay downtown, they eat, they drink, they spend money at my store. It's a needed thing. This legislation makes it so it's punishing the homeowners that have bought houses here that are paying the exact same city taxes as everybody else. They basically can't come visit their own homes. They're gonna fly in here. They can't, number one, get a parking permit for their car if they were able to drive, or number two, they can't print out temporary parking passes for their cars or any friends or family that are gonna come. So that's pretty ridiculous and unfair. I'd like for all of us to imagine that we had a beach house, say in Bethany Beach, and we weren't actually allowed to come visit it. We were not allowed to park a car or have any of our friends ever come park a car, just because we rented out part-time to help cover mortgages. I'm gonna say that that's, you know, who would ever want to buy, you know, a property anywhere that you could never come visit? And I will tell you that if this passes, my homeowners certainly will definitely sell their properties and have no interest in retiring in Annapolis or really have anything to do with it, because it's really like a shunning them because they're not full-time residents yet. So, you know, to expect a homeowner to come into town and Uber in, and then Uber to Grawls and to Home Depot when they need stuff for their house, it's silly. And I feel like this legislation is basically against short-term rentals, not really against parking. Because I can tell you, in my neighborhood, we have short-term rentals, and we actually don't mind them because two-thirds of the year, they're empty. It frees up parking all over our blocks. If it was a full-time residence or even, you know, a rental, it'd be 3 or 4 cars there 365 days of the year. So, you know, I know this is basically about parking, but really the underlying thing with the non-residents is discluding the short-term rental people. In addition, I want to note that the rentals that I manage are not only licensed with the city, we also have a business and sales tax use license. So they've gone through considerable expense for this. One homeowner just had to completely hardwire the whole entire house, costing $3,500 in order for Mary to come in and say, okay, you know. In addition to that, Anyway, in addition to that, they also have very expensive homeowners insurance that they have to deal with. I mean, some of these policies, $3,000, $4,000 a year. So they've invested in order to have a short-term rental license. Along with this sales tax use, we also pay 6% to the city, 6% to the state, and 7% to the city, every single rental. So in the past 3 years, out of these 3 properties, we've paid $34,000 to the state and $41,000 to the finance office downstairs. So I want you to consider that that'll be gone if you don't just let homeowners that are paying the exact same property taxes as everybody else, in addition to these other taxes, in addition to the day passes that they purchase, you know, when they do come and visit, the whatever, $3.50 a day. So, you know, my last point in this is, if it passes and the homeowners do sell, this doesn't just affect tax money, but countless local people from all the different wards. They rely on this income. The housekeepers, landscapers, all of the day laborers that we have in there. I mean, it's their job. It's their full-time job to come clean after the people check out. So, you know, keep that in mind. I think I've pretty much covered everything I was going to say. I just feel like it's a kind of a backdoor way to legislate short-term rentals, which, believe me, I do actually think needs some legislation and some groundwork, because the city is missing out. So many of them are not licensed properly, and the ones that are, I feel like now, if we don't license it, then the owner would be able to get a parking permit, right? you know? It just seems really unfair for people that are doing it legit.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Alderman Onet has some questions. Or, sure.
Thank you. They may like us even less because some of us are working on short-term rental legislation, but I wanted to ask you, what is the parking availability now, and what will it be reduced to under this legislation? I mean, is there sufficient parking for these non-resident owners now, or?
Sure. I mean, they only come a few times a year. I mean, this is, like I said, a lot of these people, they don't want to sell their homes. They're temporarily transferred, they're going somewhere, or they're people that have bought houses that plan on retiring here, can't do it yet.
Right.
They do come visit. Now, when we do have rentals, I'm a resident downtown. I get it. And, you know, I like my parking too. We're not giving out parking permits to 6, 7 cars, things like that. I absolutely tell people, please, just come Uber. I mean, you're not going to want to find a parking spot in Zone 1. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, you know? We do try and do that as much as possible. Honestly, and I don't know, I mean, you know, we live in Zone 2. We don't really have a parking problem over there. I've never not found a spot, ever in my block. I mean, truly, and that is even commissioning week, 4th of July, Midnight Madness. I mean, the city, when we talk about our residential permits, you know, I've lived here my whole life. I can tell you what gets abused, and that's the consent, like the form that you can do that says that, you know, certificate of possession, that's what gets abused. People say, oh, yeah, I have a certificate of, you know, this car, but it's their babysitters, you know, it's their midshipmen, it's some of their home employees, you know, I see it all the time. I'm not here to tattle on anybody, but if you really want to be strict about it, that's where the abuse happens. It's not the temporary passes or anybody taking advantage of that.
But at least from your observation, right now, all of the people you're associated with are okay, and this would make it worse for them.
Well, they can't, with this ruling, and, you know, tell me if I'm wrong, it's saying that if you are a non-resident and you have a valid short-term rental license, so you went through all the work to do it, you are not allowed to get a parking permit in town.
Right.
I mean, would you ever buy here?
All right, thank you. That's what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
City Attorney would like to ask a question. Yep.
Okay, so your testimony primarily relates to the sentence in the bill which says that non-resident parking permits may not be issued to property owners whose properties are licensed for rental by the city?
Correct.
Okay, just thank you.
Yep. We good?
Well, thank you. We'll work on it.
Anybody else? Thank you so much. Next speaker, Tom Rikus, please come forward.
Mayor Buckley, City Council members, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Tom Rikus. I've been here before. I live at 163 Prince George Street, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. So I'm here tonight to testify on behalf of the Ward 1 Residents Association regarding 0419. I am a past member of the WARA Executive Board, and I currently chair the WARA Parking Committee. In 2016, the City of Annapolis directed SP Plus to conduct an Annapolis parking utilization study. Among other things, the study noted that the City of Annapolis has long recognized that the combined on- and off-street parking capacity, as well as the private inventory, does not appear to adequately meet demand a significant portion of time. Subsequently, this results in driver frustration, contributes to traffic congestion, illegal parking actions affecting public safety, and abuses of these special parking districts. In November 2018, a Public Information Act request for information sparked discussion with the city on the requirements of the residential parking permit program, the potential for abuse of the program, and the need to strengthen processes to ensure that applicants for the residential parking permits are entitled to those privileges. Several findings from that collaboration with the city helped frame this legislation. Now, for me, based on discussions with the WARA Executive Board, other WARA Parking Committee members, and the general WARA membership, my sense is that WARA members are solidly behind the legislation where it clarifies the eligibility requirements for resident, non-resident, and temporary parking permits. That's the first section of this legislation, the eligibility criteria. And the legislation's language on resident status is consistent with what is required by other jurisdictions with similar programs. Okay, so while there's agreement on the need to tighten up the eligibility requirements to obtain permits, there has been debate as to the provisions made for temporary permits. That debate is not unexpected. WARA has relatively 360 active members, so there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. Now, what we do agree on in the association is that living in Ward 1 comes with parking challenges. We have dinner parties, we have family gatherings, we have visitors, unexpected ones and expected ones. We have overnight guests, and various tradespeople are working on our historic district homes often. And we all agree within the association that there's a desire to accommodate these folks with parking permits. Now, in the feedback that I've gotten from association members, the number of the permits that residents want has ranged between 0 and 15 per month. As far as I can tell, the primary concern is the reduction of the monthly allocation of permits. Following close second to that is a concern over paying for a permit and not being able to use it before it expires. So after hearing some voices and not hearing from a greater number of voices, I can't say if the majority of residents could live with the amended number of 10 or not. However, from residents expressing concern over the expiration of the permits, their concern would be mitigated if they could get permits as needed, when needed. Now, as for the non-resident permit, considering that some jurisdictions make no provision for non-residents, and then considering that some jurisdictions do make some accommodation, what's being proposed is considered fair and consistent with other practices. Lastly, an interesting factoid. My notes from a March 28, 2017 public meeting where SP Plus presented the results of the 2016 parking study mention addressing problems or issues with the residential parking through legislation. And here we are, almost 2 years to the day, doing just that.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. No, thank you. Would anyone else like to come and speak on O-4-19? Okay, declare the public hearing on O-4-19 closed. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is legislative actions on second readers, beginning with Resolution R-45-18, 2018 Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study.
Is there a motion to refer the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study draft dated August 31, 2018 to the Planning Commission?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so moved.
Second.
Discussion, Alderman Arnett.
Is this essentially the council voting in support of the letter that you've already transmitted to the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Then I'm in favor.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
No.
Right. Is there a motion to withdraw R-45-18 on second reader?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Discussion, anybody? Alderman Savage?
Yes, so I think it's a good idea to withdraw this resolution. As you heard earlier tonight, a number of concerns have been brought up about the sector study. I myself have concerns that it's a bit too ambitious, outside the original scope, and really in itself on the level of effort of an actual development of an actual comp plan. And I do find that, somebody said earlier that it is on the, it's on the tail end of 10 years after our 2009 study, our 2009 comp plan. It really doesn't make sense to amend a comp plan that old. We really need to get started with our 2022 comp plan development, as the county has done with their general development plan. And at this point, I'm more inclined to withdraw it because, again, I'm not confident that this study can be amended, at least from my point of view and my residents of my ward, can be amended to a satisfactory point. Because the things that I at least have heard and that I would like to see changed are pretty significant. I mean, I'd like to see the removal of an entire Appendix D, which proposes to change our adequate public facility methodology and our traffic assessment methodology, because I think that whole proposal is flawed, and it's going to move us away entirely from looking at the adequacy of our roadways and the impact of our roadways. And I think that's a big mistake. Some of the other big issues I have with it are, I think we should really remove the entire urban center community character that's in the designation. I think that's way too dense for Annapolis, way too high. That'd be like Pearl town centers being built up around the city. Third thing, I think we need to create a brand new community character designation that promotes and looks at actually embracing downzoning. We need to look at further synergy with our environmental goals and reports that we have. We need to look at, as was mentioned in your letter, Mr. Mayor, the affordable housing, which I do think needs to be analyzed. We've got a failure to look at the changing cultural needs in the sector itself, which was actually a requirement of the comp plan when that was one of the main goals of the original comp plan, the original sector study as laid out in the comp plan. We've got an overuse of form-based zoning, and as was mentioned, a kind of a failure to reach out to the specific neighborhoods that would be where change is being called for. I have a number of areas in my ward where, again, when people go and talk to them personally, I've got a number of calls where people are concerned, they haven't been reached out to. And I feel like we need to just essentially scrap this, roll what we can into the comp plan for 2020 and go from there. It's not to mention, there are some great ideas in this study, and I think we do need to continue the discussion, have those continue to go forward. Even if this gets withdrawn, I fully intend to, have some of this conversation in the Environmental Matters Committee in the future, because I think it's great that we're having these kind of conversations. But that, in my mind, is why I support a motion to withdraw at this time.
Alderwoman Henson?
So if I am misunderstanding, please help me understand it better. When a person owns property, they have the right to sell that property, and a person has the right to develop that property. It's subject to the regulations and the zoning laws wherever you are, but this is our opportunity to say what we want that development to look like, what we want that development to be. So if we discard our opportunity to say what we want that development to look like and be, then sometimes we wind up with a Royal Farms. And then all of your constituents email you about a Royal Farms that they do not want. So I don't understand where the urgency and the desire is to throw away our opportunity to say what we want it to be, or what our constituents, more importantly, want it to be. You had great suggestions on ways to amend the sector study. I don't understand why we don't roll up our sleeves and do the work of amending the sector study, taking the voices that were echoed to us from our constituents and saying this is how it can be its highest and best use to the city. We have the expert analysis, we have the data that supports and informs the decisions that we would make from a policy perspective with our planning and zoning law. I don't get discarding your opportunity to say this is what you should do, because if we think that discarding the study means that no one's going to build anything else on Forest Drive, I think that we are not being realistic. So why not have our say in what they build on Forest Drive? Why bury our heads in the sand? That's what I think, saying we are just going to withdraw it because people don't support it. I think that it's our job to help them to flesh that out. What about it do you not support? How can we fix this to make it something that you can support? This is your opportunity to say what you want. If not a Royal Farms, then what? Because it's going to be something.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Thank you. I know the remanding was probably a no-choice thing, but I voted no on principle. I know I came from the private sector, and I probably have a high sense of urgency, but I agree with the gentleman from Eastport. There are people out there that were working it. They were working it. And for us, I see a draft that was dated August 2018. And at this juncture, to hear comments like, it's too big an area, what is such and such zoning? I mean, I'm really disappointed. 90 days we had from receipt of the Planning Commission, who they are volunteers. And that was a really thorough analysis that really gave us a jump start to start looking at this flawed report. I'm not saying the report was good. It had flaws in it, but it's our job to go through it and guide the process, be the messenger, because still, no one out there knows that this is just a study and it doesn't change the frickin' zoning to put a development in someone's backyard. We didn't control the message. So we had the opportunity. We clearly knew how the public felt. I closed the public hearing because you had to be on another planet if you didn't realize that the public had strong objections to this. It was time for us to go to work. And that's what the committees are for. And we were prepared to do that, not postpone it and laugh and say phew. And I'm sorry if I'm angry. I know I'm a freshman alderman, but this is not what I'm used to. I went through that thing. I did 20 pages of a worksheet and saw the exposure, saw the risks, saw the issues we needed to talk about, and now we have this relief. So I'm not convinced that this is going to serve a purpose unless we really are prepared to work and listen to our constituents, as my colleague Alderwoman Henson said, help guide the process. I get sick when I go down Forest Drive and see abandoned homes, developments where they shouldn't be, and now at Royal Farms, abandoned homes, discontinued sidewalks, and that's acceptable. This plan was based on the fact that it was an untenable situation, and if we continue with this traffic pattern, it would be a disaster. That was the message, if nothing else, you got out of this. It has a lot of data. I don't want to throw it away. I hope at least we can agree that the principles can be utilized in the 2020 comp plan. We have a lot of land use issues to discuss. At least we know that we disagree, but we still have to agree on working it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Annette.
Thank you. Could I ask the gentle alderwoman from Ward 1, I'm not sure what you want us to do. Do you want us to not withdraw it, or do you want us to postpone it? I can't.
I don't believe we have a choice with this 90-day issue. So I feel that we should continue the committees. We went through housing, we had 4 amendments. We were able to point to a page and say, we disagree with this. Here's our respective modification. We didn't step back and say, oh, it doesn't have affordable housing, we have to postpone our decision. We have to go through the committees, invite the public, let them know that we're working on it and looking at it and addressing it. And in fairness to our city of planning and zoning, you know, they put a lot of work into it. No. And it's a multiple choice thing. It isn't all high density. It's high, medium, low, and it's implementation plans for those different scenarios. It's a worksheet. So I would suggest we still go through the committees, and I think Rules wanted to see it last so that they could be sort of the filter of what gets back to planning. I don't know if planning wants to see it again.
So I think I'm in total sympathy with what you're saying. I am proud of us that we have taken the time and the effort to do this, but there's 2 different things going on here. I think one of the things we've done by vote is to send it back to the Planning Commission and say, we have a lot more questions, we'd like to work with you, we'd like to refine this. That's done. Yeah, no, I have pages and pages of questions. I met with some of the planning commissioners last week and started to talk to them about those questions. I think the committee should continue to go ahead, but this resolution is speaking to the sector study as it exists now. I think it's premature, given that we already seem to have a strong will to change the sector study that was given to us, to at least have dialogue to talk about changing it, and then that might be the time, if we get the sector study with the repairs that we think it might need, to a place where we can say, okay, now it would be appropriate to come back with a resolution, which is always an option, to amend it to the 2009, which I think is kind of silly at this late date, but to say we're supporting these aspects of the study by passing the resolution. So I definitely do not want to see the council and the committee stop working. I'm still an advocate of having 1 or more work sessions of the council or special meetings of the council where we deliberate this together. I'm very sympathetic to Pete and Sally that they're coming committee by committee by committee and having to say things that I think we should all be hearing together. So I think by remanding, we've taken care of the timing issue. A new clock will start after the Planning Commission reconsiders, hopefully offers some amendments that are sympathetic to the things that we want, and then sends it back to us and starts another 90-day clock. The resolution, as I said, refers to a document that we hope we're going to change. So let's see whether we change it or not, because I can't tell you now whether or not I would vote. Right now, I would vote no on the resolution because there are so many things that I find fundamentally problematic. But I may be a yes vote if we go through all of this additional effort amongst ourselves and with the Planning Commission. So withdrawal, postpone, I'm indifferent, but I think we have to do something with the resolution.
Yeah, you're presenting me with a non sequitur. We can't continue on this particular resolution if we are remanding it. Ideally, I would have liked to continue on with this resolution and amend it per committee, as simple as that. but by remanding it, I don't believe that we can do that. Whether it
Well-
comes up with a new number and we continue our conversation, I'd
I
have
think
to
that's a
refer to the
question
law
that
office.
the city attorney has already opined on, but I would ask again, is it, now that we have remanded it, is it still possible for the council to continue work at the committee level or at the council level on the sector study as it was presented?
Absolutely. The committees may continue to meet with the community, ask questions, talk about potential amendments. I think that until tonight, the idea of scratching the whole study and going directly to the comprehensive plan had never been part of the idea. I'm not rejecting that idea. I'm just saying this is all being done to give everybody more time to figure out what to do.
Alderman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to get angry too, just like everybody else. Now, we're stuck in Ward 3. Now, maybe Ward 3 does not have the resources that Ward 8 has to go through this. And as I continue to say, it's going to be a bummer. Yes. I'm going to suggest, because I'm listening to the residents out here tonight, because in Ward 3 and the people in Ward 3 cannot get this done in 3 months. Whatever the reason, if we sat on it or whatever we did, we were derelict in our duties, we don't have enough time. We've got Chickawa Penround Road, we've got Forest Drive, we've got the city, we've got the county, we've got the state. This is not enough time. And so I'm going to get angry too. And what my suggestion is that we form, like we do with the police chief, like the ULI and everything else, that we form subcommittees or task force or whatever you want to call it and talk about this thing. Now, we can use this Forest Drive Eastport sector study as a tool to move forward, but I'll be doggone if I'm going to vote on this in 3 months. We don't have the time, we don't have the resources. I've got several community associations, I've got a huge Annapolis design district. This is not enough time. Call it a remand, call it a postponement, whatever you want to call it, but 3 months is not going to do it for Ward 3. We got unique issues that no one else has out here. And my fear, again, it bleeds into the Upper West Street sector study, and it also complicates matters out there for us. It's going to be a bubble to us, and we will be stuck. Again, as I've said over and over and over again, Ward 3 gets things we don't want, and the things we want we can't get. Thank you.
Alderman Finlayson was next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are you going to scream too?
No, don't need to. We have had, I heard the number 40 tonight. I remember the planning director and Dr. Nash saying something about 30-some meetings. And we can continue to have meetings after meetings after meetings. I think it is totally inappropriate to put this study on a shelf. We've done enough of that. You know, being in leadership is hard work. It takes courage. Sometimes it takes stamina. But we're here to make tough decisions. We heard from several people tonight, and there are thousands more in our community to whom we answer. We have an opportunity to get it right. We've remanded this back to the Planning Commission, and they have graciously, the volunteers that they are, have accepted to revisit it, even though they, I'm sure, felt that they had given it all the time that they needed, because they sent forward some very well thought out amendments. But we saw fit to not accept their amendments. The Rules Committee devised a plan to send the appropriate pieces of this legislation to the appropriate committees. and the Transportation Committee, or was it the Housing Committee? I apologize, did as we asked and made changes to that portion of the document so that it would suit our needs. We have a way of moving forward, but to simply kill this piece of legislation, one, is an insult to all the people who did go to all of those meetings to give their input, to the staff who was given the directive to do this chore of this sector study, which started out as the Forest Drive sector study. And it grew into something considerably more, but that's okay. So for us to, and the likelihood of it coming back is not very great, because if you want to kill it, you don't want it to come back. The Planning Commission, without having a piece of legislation in front of them, really have nothing on which to act. So what is the plan? Are we going to send them this piece of legislation back again? Or are we just telling them to revisit it? And there is no process. This is not a process that this is not a process that we have. So we're going to create a new process. I think we can determine timelines as we see fit. But I would ask each of you to remember that we're here to make hard decisions for everyone. And while we may feel that we have a luxury of listening to only a few, there are an awful lot of other people out there who are silent, and their silence says they're not in disagreement with the things that we do. That's why we're all here. So I would ask you to not kill this piece of legislation, but to postpone it and give all of the committees an opportunity to work through the process that we have in place now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to let the City Attorney clarify our options before everybody goes forward.
Well, I really just wanted to say for the record, I know that we're all talking about the same thing in the sense that everybody feels that we need more time to develop our objections and changes to the study. And so the purpose of the remand or referral back to the Planning Commission is to give us that time. If we didn't remand it back, we would be bound by it on a date certain. And the additional time to look at the study comes because A, we're not going to be in violation of state law, and B, the 90 days doesn't begin to run until the Planning Commission sends it back to us. So, you know, I don't know what length of time we might have to look at it, but it's far longer than just 90 days from tonight,
Well,
that's for sure.
let me ask a question, since I have the floor. Are we talking about, and you're right, there are two different issues. We already voted to remand it back to the Planning Commission. Gone. Okay, done. So are we talking about withdrawing this legislation, period, or simply postponing it until the Planning Commission brings their decisions back to us?
The resolution is not going to sit on any calendar for the future. Instead, this particular resolution, which calls for the adoption of the study, will be gone. It will be withdrawn. And then when the Planning Commission sends its next version of the study to us, or to the City Council, there will be a new, fresh resolution that would accompany that draft, just like this one was doing.
So it will automatically be reintroduced as a new piece of legislation after the Planning Commission deliberates?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. Well, not automatically. Everybody, I mean, the resolution has to be drafted and introduced, but yes.
Okay,
the plan is to have another resolution.
I just want to be clear. We're not voting to withdraw it, to never see it again. It will come back with the sponsor or sponsors. Or you? Or me, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Alderman Savage was next. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That helps clarify things. Thank you. And I think it's important to point out that this doesn't kill the study per se. And even if we were to just have this not come up again as the sector study, I think it still doesn't prevent us from having this conversation going forward, because we are going to have the same conversation, and again, for our 2020 comp plan. I still have not seen a schedule about when that process is supposed to start. And again, the county has started theirs. Well, apparently it started. I haven't, but again, I don't know what that has entailed. This is a conversation we do need to talk about a lot of these ideas. Like I said, there are great ideas, but I think with this sector study in particular, it's very frustrating because we got this at the 11th hour, right? They had their 40 meetings over the course of 2 years, met with the Planning Commission, and then we all of a sudden get it. I mean, I don't think it would be irresponsible for us just to simply vote yes, without giving this its due attention. Took a significant amount of time to review. So maybe that's a fault with the process itself, but we need, and that's where I think it's beneficial to withdraw this resolution, but continue the conversation. We need to somehow reinsert ourselves as the council, as the people's representatives, into the process of not just the sector study, but the comprehensive plan. Again, it should not wait till the 11th hour for us. We obviously have a lot of great ideas and things we want to see changed, so let's have those conversations. My fear with, and hopefully we can meet with the Planning Commission like Alderman Arnett has suggested for a number of weeks now, meet with them to kind of have this conversation and to work out some of these details before it gets reintroduced. Because my fear is that when it does get amended, it's going to be a skeleton of its former self, of the sector study. And I think at this point it should, because there are some significant things that need to get changed. The other comment is regarding the Royal Farms. I think that's a valid concern, but I still have not heard an answer from our staff about how the proposed form-based zoning will avoid such a situation from coming up. Because form-based zoning was characterized in the 2009 comp plan as the most business-friendly type of zoning. That right there tells me that it may not prevent businesses who want to come in from having specific uses. It moves away from restricting uses, where currently we do restrict uses. In the Royal Farms, in terms of having their gas station and the car wash, that is a prohibited use under the zoning. They actually have to apply for a special exception. And I think that's how the zoning should work. And for me, since the study's calling for form-based zoning on 2/3 of the city, I really want to understand it better. It's a big concept, a lot of potential implications, and I think we need to get a handle of that during these deliberations. It's not about preventing anything else from getting built, but it's a matter of making sure that what does get built gets built in a way that the community wants. And I think when we reset this process, if you want to call it a reset, I think we do need to try to go out to the communities that would be impacted, as was mentioned earlier. Thank you.
So Alderwoman Pendle-Charles and Alderman Arnett.
I'd like to know, what is the grand plan for us working with the county on the county roadways that abut Forest Drive? Will that only take 90 or 120 or 6 months or a year? Because I cannot agree with anything unless we have a grand plan with working with the county and the city, because that's my issue. And if we don't have one, if we can't get them on board with this, which begs the question, should we have a task force, and should we now join with them in the plan that they have out there? Maybe that's what we should do, because I cannot support something unless somebody can tell me what the grand plan is for the city to work with the county to resolve these issues that I've got in Ward 3. And let's talk about the state too. And how long have we asked for a traffic signal at Western Gibraltar for almost 20 years, and we still haven't gotten it? And that's a state issue, because West Street is a state roadway. This is much more complicated in Ward 3 than any other ward. So if someone can assure me that the county is going to work with us on Chicopee and Forest, hey, I'm all for it. But we can talk about everything we want to talk about, but if we can't fix that, and we can't come up with an agreement with the county that we either work with the county or we have a task force with county governmental officials and city folks on it, then I can't support this. I don't care what we're talking. If somebody can tell me and assure me that's what we're going to do, then I'm all for it. But if we can't do that, Ward 3 is out. There's nothing I can do.
Thank you. Alderman Annette.
Does that mean Ward 3 is seceding? Ward 8 is talking about that. We'll join you.
I'm sneaking as many county people in here as possible so we have access.
Right. So actually, Alderwoman Pendle-Charles, that's exactly what the Eastport Civic Association asked in their 5 points. They want a city, county, state.
I heard that tonight.
Right, and they want funding for all of these improvements before we change the zoning, not after we change the zoning. But I just wanted to say, as a wise mayor once said, let there be spaces in our togetherness.
Amen.
Stand together, yet not too close together. For the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow.
Fred and I are together. There's no space between us.
Seriously, I think we really all are agreeing on many important things. One, I think we need more time. Two, I think we're very serious about it. Three, I think there are some things that could be changed given enough time to do that. And as I said earlier, I'm indifferent. The mayor is the sponsor of the resolution. If he wants to withdraw it, he simply has to take his sponsorship off of the resolution. It has no sponsor, and it goes away. I do think that we do have to do a resolution. I think that, first of all, the Planning Commission did not consider legislation. They considered the study. The resolution was never before the Planning Commission. The resolution is our business. This is what we're about doing. It was suggested that we adopt this by the planning staff as an amendment to the 2009 comp plan. We can do that or not do that. I think it's pretty irrelevant at this point. I think what is relevant is what we're going to do in the future, what's going to go into the next comp plan, and from this, which is a study, and actually I think this gentleman said it best, it's really a proposal, and we have to decide whether we accept the proposal or not. We have to decide whether the risks are fully covered, whether or not there are other options that we want to consider, for example, downzoning, not upzoning, all of those things. So I really feel that we are all really sane, except for Mark, who isn't saying anything. Smart man. I think we're really all saying the same thing. We need more time. Sheila, if this resolution is withdrawn, we can always put in a new one. Maybe you and I can do it together. We'll have time for a resolution, but first we got to solve what the study is saying and how we feel about it. Rhonda, I really do agree with you. I think of Ward 3 as kind of the bottle in an old Coke bottle. Everything is getting pushed up the peninsula to Ward 3, and it's going to be chaotic there. We have to address that. So as I say, I think we need to take a vote, or the mayor, you can just say you're withdrawing your resolution.
Take a vote, Alderman Payan.
Thank you. I'm sitting back here. I'm not as directly affected as just about everybody else here on the council. My ward is, when I say I'm not, I mean my ward is not affected, yes, for sure, but not as directly as others. Does everybody understand that we've already remanded this and that this is, the mayor has every right to withdraw this, and just as we all have a right to withdraw legislation, I mean, we're all sitting here talking for the last half an hour, 45 minutes about what? I mean, there've been some great points made, but they don't really have anything to do with the issue at hand. And in light of that, I'd call the question. I mean, let's vote.
Okay.
Am I the only one that figured that out?
No, I don't want anybody to have any fun tonight, so.
All right, I'm going to go. All those in favour of withdrawing R-45-18, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Ayes have it. Thank you.
So soon.
That was fun.
The City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ordinance O-47-18, special events, for the purpose of amending the definition of city-sponsored event.
Is there a motion to adopt O-47-18 on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Alderman Arnett.
So this
Oh,
was
there's some amendments, sorry about that.
This was discussed at the Environmental Matters Committee. One of the flukes of our legislation that this is in front of Environmental Matters, but we had asked that it be referred back to the Office of Law for some clarification. And one of them...
A number of months ago.
Pardon?
A number of months ago, I think, right?
Yes, well,
I didn't hear
a while
that.
ago, but it was before you were here. So, no. One of them is really a matter of grammatical construction that came up recently. The amendments are that the City Council, one, the City Council approves as a city-sponsored event, semicolon, inures and so on, semicolon, and benefits to the public. Does that mean that it can only be a special event if it satisfies all three of those? Because it's semicolons and they're connected with an and?
Yes.
All right. So, other than the fact that I'm not terribly clear in my understanding of number 2, inures slowly to the benefit of the public with no nonprofit or emolument to the city to thereby serve as a government function. I don't know what the nonprofit, it raises
It's
signals.
no profit, not nonprofit.
All right, no profit. What is the difference between no profit and nonprofit?
Well, a nonprofit is normally used to refer to an organization that is not organized for profit. I think this just means that there's not going to be any money going to the city.
Okay. So we have to declare that it is a special event. It cannot benefit or provide profit or emolument to the city, and it must benefit public health, safety, and welfare, and thereby serve a government purpose. So it has to be all three.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. And that, and as the drafters, is that the intent?
Yes.
Could you remind us again? I know this had a technical legal purpose. Could you remind us again what we were doing here? I think it had to do with risk to the city or something?
Yes, after the Capital Gazette benefit concert, in our dialogue over deciding to waive the fees, I asked the question to the city attorney, what was the significance or the legal significance of the city being a sponsor of that event? The primary legal significance when the city sponsors something is the civil or the tort claims immunity that a municipality has. You cannot sue if you have a tort claim, the city of Annapolis. The case law, Trader v. Montgomery County, is what the city attorney cited, other pieces of case law, but that was the original source, the one that's cited. And the other pieces of case law says that when the court is defining what is government action, that this is the litmus test for what is government action. So if these certain criteria, and I tried to mirror the language. My original draft to the Office of Law was a copy-paste breakdown of the language. They tweaked it to make it more user-friendly and understandable because the goal was to have people who read it actually be able to follow what it was requiring of of the city to be able to be a covered and protected event for a city and government action. So they broke it down into these 3 different criteria, all of which must be applied in order to be a city action and to be a city-sponsored event. So now it wouldn't be a city-sponsored event simply because you waive a fee. That doesn't affect the city's ability to waive fees. The city would still be able to do so, but something would be a city-sponsored event if it met these 3 criteria, which were the test for government action.
So in all cases, the council will first have to declare it a special event. And then it will also have to meet these other 2 criteria. And the staff will know that something just couldn't come in that's a benefit to public health, safety, and welfare and become a special event.
And become a city-sponsored event.
City-sponsored event, you're right, correct.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Pam?
I assume that the D1 would be taken care of, for the most part, annually when we vote on 8 or 10 events that we declare to be city-sponsored events. We won't do this individually. Otherwise, I don't see the point in the legislation if they have to come in every single time we want to have an event. We do once a year, usually about this time of year, actually, I think. And there are usually 8 or 10 events that we agree are city-sponsored events. Is that what you would anticipate being happening here?
I know we have the major city dock events, and we have certain events that we permit. As a process question, I believe it's usually the mayor's office that is the facilitator or coordinator of city-sponsored events. So as often as the mayor was inspired to have a city-sponsored event and brought that to the council is as often as we would have this before us. But it is my understanding that we do have a standard list of things that we as a city do sponsor. So I would anticipate the standard array of things, and then anytime we're so fortunate to have something to add to that calendar, it would be before the council listing these 3 criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, and please forgive me because I still don't understand this emolument. Does that mean, that's the second one, does that mean that, well, first of all, we had a study committee who brought forward the plans for special events that broke all of our events down into major events and minor events because we were having an overabundance of events, okay, that were interfering with any number of activities in the city, like living. So, well, that was the perception. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that was the perception, okay? And I choose my terms, my wording deliberately. So what I just heard you say was that now we will be revisiting that list of approved special events annually?
What I'm saying is that we would visit the list of city-sponsored events, and it would have to be by resolution of the council. It doesn't require any particular frequency, so it does not say that we would have to have a resolution annually. It's not my understanding that our resolutions have an expiration date, so it would be a continuing resolution until something changed. So as often as we visit that resolution now would be as often as we visit that resolution under this particular piece of legislation.
So the events that are already listed as our special events from years past would have to be revisited at some point in time, whether it's annually, semi-annually, or whenever we say so. So are we doing away with the list that we already have and bringing forth a new list? Are we using that old list as our new list?
It does not specifically reference grandfathering, if you will, events that were city-sponsored events under the prior definition where it was simply waiving a fee, making it a city-sponsored event as opposed to moving forward with city-sponsored events. I would defer to the city attorney on if there would be a need to go back and then evaluate every event that was designated city-sponsored, or if you would just do so with the new criteria going forward on events that would happen from its effective date thereafter.
I might get the city attorney, city manager to give us some clarification.
Is it in the city code, though, exactly what those events are?
No.
Where are they listed?
They are passed by resolution. So I would think if you are passing by resolution that the 4th of July let's say in April of this year, you say in fiscal year 2020, the following are city-sponsored special events. 4th of July parade, Memorial Day parade, New Year's Eve fireworks, whatever. As soon as those happened, that event's over. And so unless you said, put in the ordinance itself, all 4th of July parade, all New Year's Eve celebrations, all Memorial Day, I would think you need a resolution each time.
I'm not sure that's what we have done, and I trust that
it is.
Alderman, I trust, we had a committee that studied this and brought their findings to us. Now, I could be wrong, maybe my memory's flawed, and that's okay, but I'm almost sure they're listed in some document where we don't have to revisit the MLK parade every year. But my second piece of the question is, with the number 2 item, D2, on page 2, I guess it is, does that mean that we will not charge anyone a fee, not a fine, but a fee for their event, if they're a city-sponsored event, at all?
No,
it doesn't.
Profit is something, emolument speaks to your compensation. It speaks to, it does not speak to charging your fee. Your profit is something that is in excess of your cost, so your fees are associated with your cost. Your profit is on top of any cost that you have, and our fees are related to the cost. So emolument and profit is outside of the scope of our fees. So we would still be able to charge our fees.
Okay, so here's the English teacher, and I looked up the word emolument, because I just still didn't get it. And it said salaries as related to. So Ms. Nolan is our special events coordinator. And so does that mean a portion of her salary, because she coordinates the event, will not be charged back?
I will allow the city attorney to give you the advice of counsel. I can answer that question for you, but I think you should have the advice of counsel on making that decision.
And I also, excuse me, I'm sorry.
You know, Mr. Mayor, can we postpone this until we get...
I can answer your question.
Until we get it right.
Felicia's salary isn't charged back now.
Well, but I'm trying to get to what is, based upon the amended language, the proposed amended language. So that was just an example of what this means. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, shit, please, let's get the
And
city attorney, and then we're going to go to Ellie after that. Yeah.
I would also clarify, you have an annual resolution every year that names what the events are for the upcoming year. So you have Resolution 718, you have Resolution 1217, you have, so every year you're passing a resolution that says what the city-sponsored special events are for the upcoming year.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted, I'm sorry.
So, did you want to?
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I also looked up emolument for probably the 10th time in my life. And it's not a word that anybody really uses in everyday language. I think most people use the word only in connection with a hotel in D.C. I really think the point of the phrase is to make sure that no money is coming to the city from it. And I think emolument carries with it the connotation that it's a salary or money to a person. And that's really, so I would like to read, is it Trader versus Montgomery County?
Yes.
I'd like to read that, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time looking at this.
I second the motion to postpone.
Alderwoman Tierney.
I just wanted to revisit when my colleague Alderwoman Finlayson was saying, just to refresh our memories. We did, and Teresa did just mention this as well, but I'll repeat it. We introduced special event legislation 4 or 5 years ago, and the result of that was that every year we would have 2 pieces of legislation which would list all of these events in one resolution. In fact, we just passed it, I believe, maybe within the last month. And then we passed the itinerant merchants hand in hand with it for any vendors or merchants that are associated with those events. So it's, and then of course, if there's one that comes up like, oh gee, the St. Patrick's Day parade, I mean, we always have the opportunity to vote on one individually, but the purpose of this special events legislation was to prevent that and to have them all on one list. So I suspect, as a result of this legislation, we would probably need to revisit that list and make sure that all of those events meet the criteria that's stated in the language. Alleged, Alicia.
I seconded it.
So you're a sponsor of the amendment, but you're going to...
Well, I was just going to say, if you think your head hurts now, wait till you look at the amendment.
I did.
I can't figure out what we were doing. I mean, I think we need...
So we have a motion before the amendment to postpone this, so we have a second on that. So I'm just going to vote on that.
I couldn't put the words in. I tried.
All those in favor of a postponement say aye.
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 All those opposed say no.
No.
Roll call.
Yes. Mayor Buckley.
No.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
In deference to our city attorney, I would request that it be postponed.
It's also known as an option.
Alderman Finlayson.
May I, point of information, or the motion on the floor is to postpone it?
Yes.
Is that correct? Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez.
No.
Alderman Henson. No. Alderman Savage.
No.
Alderman Arnett.
Point of information, although I think it's about to be mute, we have to postpone to a time certain, but aye.
We're getting good at that. Sorry.
Pressure's on, Ellie.
Alderman Tierney.
No.
All right.
Alderman Pam.
No.
The motion to postpone is defeated.
Okay, so we have an amendment, O-47-18, amendment with sponsors, Ross Arnett, Alderman Savage, Ellie Tierney. Is there a motion to amend O-47-18 on second reader? We need that motion.
So moved.
Yep.
So moved.
Second. Now, we've done a lot of discussion, so I think we could probably just go and vote on this, don't you?
Second.
Well, we now have a motion to discuss the amendment.
Yes.
Oh my God. Well, we take one and we make it 3, and we make 2, 3, and 3, 2, and put a period after function, and then add a semicolon.
I tried to do that within the draft.
You can't do it.
Okay.
I just
Very
tried
tough.
to do it again
I had a
today.
hard time. I couldn't do it.
I think the general notion that we were discussing, I'll let my cohorts in crime chime in on this as well, is that we wanted to simply say that you had to do 2 and 3 first, and then 1. But after discussing emoluments and inurements, I don't know what that would do for this legislation.
Okay. All right, let's vote. All those in favour of the amendment to O-47-18 on second reader, say aye. Aye. In favour? All those opposed, say no.
No.
I abstain.
You're not getting out of it that easily.
So the amendment is defeated, and you're on your third reader, but.
We haven't voted on this.
What?
This? Yeah, the
What got into to us that night. We were just restructuring.
Same thing that got into some people tonight.
Shanika, you're not voting to support your amendment?
That's not my amendment.
To make it clear,
Yeah.
on second reader, right here, we need to do this part. Let's see, that's to amend, we need to say all in favor for this part. Because it's already on second reader, we need to adopt on second reader,
Okay.
skip this, skip
Oh,
this,
so yeah,
and
you're
then
not
do
in
this
the-
one.
yeah. Okay, great.
Okay.
So right now, you're in the process of adopting on second reading. Because the
Okay.
amendment failed.
So is there a motion to adopt O-47-18 on second reader?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're down to third reader. Is there a motion to adopt O-47-18 on third reader?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Yes?
Alderman Pendle Charles? Aye. Alderman Finlayson? Aye. Alderman Rodriguez? Aye. Alderman Henson?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Present.
Does that mean?
All right, passes. That didn't take long.
No, wait a minute.
Wait, I'm still here. I'm still fired up. Yes, aye. Yes.
Alderman Payne?
Aye.
Okay.
All right.
And you,
Get a little mixed up there. Thank you. The motion passes. Miss City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda. Agenda is completed.
Mr. Mayor, the agenda is completed.
Is there anything else for good order?
I got that right.
Alderman Paone.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
All those in favour, say aye. Okay. Get out here before 10.
Joining us for
Meeting is adjourned.